Or fear doesn't start when the enemy sees your army. Fear begins the moment they realize one person alone dismantled everything they built. Let that sink in, chosen one. Because that's exactly what happened here. They had groups, they had circles, they had entire networks tied together with schemes and dark intentions. But you walked in like a one-man army, and without even trying, you turned their fortress into rubble. Now imagine this for a moment. Chosen one, an entire gang, sharpening their knives in secret, whispering in dark corners, convinced that their numbers give them power. And then, one quiet step from you, one unexpected move, and suddenly they're scattering like rats when the lights come on. That's what terrifies them. It's not just your strength, it's the fact that their collective couldn't match your individuality. And here's the fact that screams louder than any spell book ever could. Studies show that in nature, predators often attack in packs, but a single animal with unbreakable focus can shift the balance and send the entire group fleeing. The universe works in the same way. A pack of wolves may circle, but one lion is enough to scatter them. You were that lion, chosen one. They came in numbers, but you carried presence. And presence backed by truth is more powerful than any ritual, any trick, any shadow. That's why they're scared to death, because you proved that their gang of witches, their alliances, their whispered threats couldn't overpower one soul who stands firm. And thank you, chosen one, for being here right now. Don't forget to return this energy by simply pressing like and subscribing, because when you do, you're helping spread this message to more souls who need to hear it. It's not just content, it's a mission. We all carry the responsibility to spread the light, and your presence here shows you're part of something greater. Thank you for being part of this force, chosen one. You are not just a listener. You are a soldier in this unseen battlefield, and your support builds the shield that protects countless others. Now, back to the fire that brought you here. You didn't just survive their games, you humiliated them by existing. Think about that for a second, while they gathered in circles, muttering chants, holding candles, drawing symbols in the dark. You were simply living your life, unaware that your very presence was collapsing their rituals like paper houses in the rain. It wasn't what you did, it was who you are. And that, chosen one, is what terrifies them more than anything. Because how do you fight someone who doesn't even need to fight back? How do you destroy a force that wasn't playing your game to begin with? Their biggest mistake was underestimating silence. They thought your quiet meant weakness, but the universe designed your silence as a weapon. Every time you ignored them, their spells unraveled. Every time you walked away, their grip loosened. They looked for reaction, but what they got was indifference, and that was poison to their plans. They expected a battle, but instead they faced a mirror. And what did they see? Their own weakness, their own desperation, their own crumbling foundation staring back at them. Let's be real, chosen one. The universe has always worked like this. History is full of stories where groups tried to crush an individual who carried too much truth inside them. And every single time, the group lost. Numbers don't matter when one person carries clarity, when one person embodies strength, when one person reflects back a force they can't explain. That's why they're not just bothered, they're terrified. You're the living reminder that no matter how many voices chant in the dark, it only takes one voice of light to drown them all out. And this is why they're switching sides, why some of them suddenly talk about positive energy and healing journeys after spending months throwing shade at you. They want to hide the fact that their coven fell apart. They want to cover their tracks, pretend they weren't involved, because the truth is, their schemes didn't just fail, they exposed them. They were betting on the pack, and the pack collapsed. They wanted you to look like prey, but instead, you revealed yourself as the hunter. So buckle up, chosen one, because this message is only the beginning. What we're diving into next will reveal exactly how you defeated them without lifting a finger, why the group effort shattered under your presence, and what's coming next now that their fear has reached its breaking point. This isn't fantasy, and it's not random chance. It's the universe showing once again that one soul aligned with truth is stronger than 1,000 standing in shadows. And you are living proof of it. So, chosen one, before we break this down step by step, I want you to lock in with me. Drop a comment with the word unbreakable if you know you've stood alone against a crowd and still came out on top. And if you feel this message cutting through the noise, bless the mission with your support. It's not about the amount, it's about the energy. Every bit keeps this light moving forward, pushing truth into places that darkness thought it could hide. Remember, you are part of a force bigger than you think, and when you back this, you're helping chosen ones everywhere realize their power. So don't just listen, participate, claim your spot, because this isn't just a story, it's proof of what you've already lived through. And now, let's dive into it step by step. And believe me, if you truly carry that one-man army spirit, you'll feel the pull to stay until the very end. Let's get started. Number 1, you shattered their coven without lifting a finger. They needed an army of shadows. You needed nothing but your presence, and that's why they'll never sleep right again. Let that pierce straight into them, chosen one, because this is the truth that terrifies them most. They gathered in circles, huddled together like cowards needing each other's energy just to breathe against you. They built altars, lit candles, mumbled chants, timed their rituals with the moon, thinking all of it could topple you. But the irony? All their noise couldn't silence your stillness. You, with no spells, no rituals, no props, just breath in your lungs and scars on your skin, undid everything they worked for. Now imagine this for a moment, chosen one. A mob with torches storms toward a single house, convinced that numbers equal victory. But when they arrive, their torches blow out in the wind. The mob scatters, confused, afraid, realizing that the house didn't even have to defend itself. That's what you did. You didn't fight back with their weapons. You didn't lower yourself to their level. You simply existed, and your existence turned their storm into smoke. And here's the fact that confirms everything you've felt. Research shows that when a single confident presence walks into a hostile group, the group's cohesion breaks down. They can't hold the same unity because fear of one outweighs strength in numbers. That's the physics of power, chosen one. They operated in groups because alone they are nothing. You stood alone, and that made you everything. They hoped you would break, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They wanted to see you spiral, lose your mind, question yourself, collapse under invisible weight. But instead, you showed up every day, quietly, steadily, carrying fire that no chant could smother. They whispered your downfall. You answered with silence, and that silence cracked their ritual like a mirror. Do you see how dangerous that makes you? They prepared strategies like generals before war, but you weren't even playing their game, and that's what destroyed them. They thought they could drag you into their arena, but your arena is life itself. You live, you breathe, you rise, and somehow that alone dismantles their schemes. You weren't seeking revenge. You weren't plotting against them. You were seeking peace, healing, clarity. Yet every time you exhaled, The foundations of their work shook. That's the brutal part, chosen one. They performed, you embodied. They tried to simulate power with chants and objects, but presence can't be faked. Authority isn't in the candles, the altars, or the full moons. Authority is something the universe plants deep in a soul that's endured too much to break. And you carried it without even trying. They wanted you to retaliate with force, to meet them spell for spell, curse for curse. But you refused to step into their theater. You didn't need their stage to prove anything. And that decision, your refusal, was the blade that cut them down. Here's a question you might ask yourself. How could I have defeated them without doing anything? The answer is simple. Power isn't always about what you do. It's about what you are. They needed performance, but you carried presence. They needed props, but you carried scars. They needed backup, but you carried alignment. And alignment with the universe will always outweigh imitation power. Picture it like this. They were actors rehearsing for a play, desperate for an audience. But you weren't in the audience. You were the stage itself. Without you, their play collapsed. That's why they're terrified. They wanted control, but you exposed their illusion. They learned the hard way that no ritual can override a soul designed to stand. Chosen one, do you see why they hate you now? Not because you fought them, but because you didn't. They threw everything, spells, curses, dark energy, thinking at least one would stick. But you stood untouched. And each failed attempt became another weight on their shoulders. Their rituals turned into funerals for their own power. Their plans unraveled, not because you countered them, but because your existence invalidated them. And here's the gut punch they'll never recover from. They realized you're untouchable where it matters. Physically, you bleed like anyone else, but spiritually, you're untouchable. They couldn't decode your authority. Because it wasn't borrowed or taught. It was born in your survival. Every scar on your body, every tear you've shed, every night you survived, built an energy they can't manufacture. You can't learn that in a coven. You can't chant it into existence. It's forged only by fire. And while they exhausted themselves with rituals, you were simply breathing, walking, existing. That's what scared them to death. You defeated a gang without lifting a hand. You dismantled a coven without casting a spell. You made their dark theater collapse while you were just trying to rest your mind and find peace. This is why, chosen one, they'll always fear you. Because you don't need what they need. You don't need numbers. You don't need rituals. You don't need validation. You are the force they can't touch. And the more you live, the more their systems crumble. They're left with broken altars, empty chants, and shattered circles. You're left standing taller than before, and that alone is their nightmare. Number 2, they marched in crowds. You stood in rank above them. They needed an army to feel powerful. You needed nothing but your own name. That's the truth that rattles them at their core. Chosen one. They came at you with numbers, packs, groups, alliances, whispers in unison, believing that numbers equal power. They thought strength was in being many, in chanting together, encircling you with their combined energy. But what they didn't realize is this: numbers don't define authority. Rank does. And your rank was higher than anything they could ever create. Imagine this for a moment. A swarm of ants can overwhelm crumbs on the ground, but when they meet the boot of someone who wasn't even paying attention, their numbers mean nothing. That's you. You didn't even have to bend down to acknowledge them. Their gathering, their plotting, their scheming, all of it was crushed by your weight alone. They thought numbers were their shield. In reality, their numbers were just noise. Here's a quote that should ring in their ears. 10 voices shouting lies can never outpower one voice anchored in truth. And you, chosen one, were that one voice. While they gathered like cowards who needed the comfort of each other's fear, you stood alone, unmoved, unbothered, unshaken, and that single stance made their entire gang tremble. Now maybe you're asking yourself, why were they so obsessed with bringing more people into it? Why couldn't they fight me one-on-one? Because deep down, they knew they couldn't. Weakness always hides in groups. In history, mobs burned the innocent because no one in the mob had courage to stand alone. In psychology, people follow crowds because they fear standing out. That's what they did. They relied on numbers because their individual power was dust. And yet, you didn't need numbers. You didn't need backup. You didn't need a circle cheering your name. You had rank. Rank is not about popularity. Rank is forged through scars, through silence, through survival. They built their unity in secrecy, whispering in corners, manipulating each other to believe they were strong together. But you were forged in fire. You were built in isolation. You earned your stance not by being many, but by being unbroken. Picture this, chosen one. A deck of cards shuffled together looks thick and intimidating, but pull out the ace of spades and suddenly the game is over. That's you. They stacked themselves up, trying to look taller, trying to look more powerful. But you were the ace in the game, the rank that shuts everything else down. Their collective didn't matter because you were the deciding piece. Quote this back to their shadows. Rank doesn't bow to numbers. Numbers bow to rank. And that's what they discovered when they tried to come at you in swarms. Their numbers gave them courage, but your rank stripped them of it in an instant. Now imagine this battlefield. On one side, a mob with sticks and stones, noisy, aggressive, clinging to each other for safety. On the other side, a single general. The mob thinks numbers will overwhelm. But the general doesn't need to swing. His presence alone makes the mob hesitate, second guess, scatter. That was you, chosen one. You didn't swing wildly. You didn't chase them. You stood tall in your rank, and that broke them before the war even began. Here's the irony. They thought you were just another random soul walking through life unaware of their schemes, but your rank wasn't earned in their system. It wasn't granted in their covens or through their rituals. Your rank came from survival, from nights of silence, from battles no one saw, from pain that reshaped you. That's authority they cannot mimic. They can chant all they want, but authority isn't in the chant. It's in the scars. And maybe you wonder, why didn't the universe let me have numbers too? Why did I have to stand alone? Because numbers aren't what define a chosen one. Isolation was your training ground. Pain was your initiation. Silence was your forge. The universe set you apart so that when they came together, their many couldn't stand against your one. Let's drop another gut-punching truth. A crowd without authority is still powerless. But one with authority doesn't need a crowd. That's what keeps them awake at night. You don't need validation. You don't need applause. You don't need a following to stand tall. Your rank carries weight they can't even measure. Think about wolves, chosen one. A pack howls loud to scare their prey, but a lion doesn't howl. A lion roars once, and the entire forest falls silent. That's you. Their howls were just echoes in the night, but your silent roar carried rank that silenced everything around you. And here's the part that stings them hardest. They thought popularity equaled power. They thought if they gathered enough people to whisper your downfall, it would stick. But popularity can't overthrow rank. You had clearance they could never earn. They tried to summon energy, but energy bows to alignment. They tried to build alliances, but alliances crumble before authority. They tried to manipulate outcomes, but outcomes bend to rank. Imagine, chosen one, a chessboard. They moved pawns, they gathered knights, they thought the board was theirs. But you were the king piece. One move from you decided the game. That's why they panicked. That's why they failed. They came in swarms, but swarms can't dethrone a king. Quote this into their memory. You can gather the crowd, but you can't counterfeit the crown, and that's what burns them most. You didn't fight for recognition. You didn't beg for support. You carried something they could never fabricate. So let's answer this clearly. Why are they scared to death now? Because their whole strategy was built on the illusion that numbers could overpower you, and you shattered that illusion just by standing. Their group rituals, their whispered spells, their alliances, it all dissolved when faced with rank. And now, chosen one, they know they can't touch you, because numbers can be broken, rank cannot. And here's the closing metaphor. Picture a storm of arrows fired at one warrior. The mob thinks the warrior will collapse, but instead the arrows bounce off his armor. The mob realizes the battle is already lost. That's what happened. They fired everything they had together, and you stood unshaken. That's not just survival, that's domination. So remember this, chosen one. They waged war with numbers, but you countered with rank. They believed in the power of many, but you carried the authority of one. And that's why they'll never stop fearing you. Because numbers fade. Rank remains. Number 3. You outlasted their darkness until it died on its own. They wanted you to break in silence, but you broke their patience instead. That's the brutal truth, chosen one. They weren't aiming for one strike to take you out instantly. That would have been too loud, too obvious. No, their plan was far more cowardly. They wanted to chip away at you like termites gnawing wood, slow and hidden. A financial blow here, a betrayal there, sleepless nights that stretched like torture. They thought if they kept pressing long enough, you'd eventually collapse under the weight. But what they didn't expect was your endurance. You didn't just take their storms, you outlived them. Now imagine this, a candle set in the wind. The breeze hits it again and again, hoping the flame will sputter out. But instead, the flame leans, flickers, and then grows stronger because the wax keeps feeding it. That was you. Their winds didn't kill your fire, it taught it to bend without breaking. They thought repetition would wear you down, but repetition built you into something indestructible. Here's a fact they never calculated. Research in psychology shows that repeated exposure to stress doesn't always weaken a person. Sometimes it builds what's called post-traumatic growth, where the very struggles that were meant to break you end up expanding your strength. That's exactly what happened. They kept throwing pressure, hoping you'd shatter. Instead, every storm became another scar, and every scar became armor. And maybe you've asked yourself, why didn't they just stop when it wasn't working? Because they believed time was on their side. They thought the longer they held out, the sooner you'd fold. But time wasn't their ally. It was yours. With every year that passed, with every silent night you endured, with every morning you woke up when you weren't supposed to, you proved them wrong. They thought they were running a sprint. You were running a marathon. They were out of breath long before you even hit your stride. Imagine a predator stalking its prey, circling, waiting for exhaustion to set in. But the prey keeps moving, keeps breathing, keeps surviving. Eventually, the predator collapses from hunger, not the prey. That's what you did. You let them waste their energy while you endured. You outlasted them, and their own persistence became their downfall. Quote this into their shadows. Endurance is the weapon that kills every enemy plan quietly. They wanted to see you self-destruct, but instead, you kept showing up. Broken maybe, scarred yes, but never defeated. Your survival became your sharpest blade. And here's what stings them most. You didn't just survive, you survived with your heart intact. You didn't grow bitter, you didn't rot in the darkness, you didn't become what they were. You healed, you found clarity. You even found fire in your eyes again. That's what ruined them, because the storm's only victory would have been turning you into them. It didn't. It activated you. They forgot that some chosen ones aren't destroyed by pain. They are refined by it. You didn't just live through their tactics. You made their tactics useless. Every attempt, every delay, every silent attack only added more layers to your resilience. And now, chosen one, you carry a strength they will never decode. Not because you fought harder, but because you lasted longer. Number 4, you became the mirror that shattered their illusions. They thought they were stabbing you in the dark, but all they pierced was their own reflection. That's the part that eats them alive. Chosen one. They believed every curse, every whispered chant, every ounce of malice would sink into you like poison. But poison only works if the body accepts it. Yours didn't. You were too aligned, too clean, too pure in motive. And that purity didn't just block their attacks, it reflected them. Their so-called spells never landed. They boomeranged. Imagine this. Someone hurls mud at a spotless glass wall. They expect the wall to stain, but instead the mud splashes back, covering their own clothes. That's exactly what happened. They thought their rituals would stain your spirit, drag you down, pull you into confusion. Instead, it splattered right back into their own lives, amplified. Some of them lost money, some lost health, some lost sleep. And all the while, you kept walking forward, glowing. Here's a fact that makes this undeniable. Psychology calls it projection. Whatever a person can't deal with inside themselves, they throw at someone else. But projection always rebounds. It can't stay out there forever. It returns home. That's why their rituals cracked their own houses, ruined their own peace, and even turned their covens against each other. You weren't the problem. Their hatred was. And when it hit you, it had nowhere to go but back. Quote this, straight into their nightmares. The mirror doesn't keep your secret. It returns it. You, chosen one, were that mirror. Not because you were trying to fight, not because you armed yourself with spells, but because your alignment didn't let you absorb filth. You were too busy healing, growing, evolving, and that's what made their attacks crumble like a house of cards. Maybe you've asked yourself, why did they seem to suffer more after coming for me? The answer is simple. Because when darkness collides with light, the darkness doesn't stain the light. The light exposes the darkness. Your joy after their sabotage humiliated them. Your peace after their chaos embarrassed them. Your success after their schemes left them speechless. Not because you were proving a point, but because your very existence revealed their failure. Imagine a thief breaking into a house only to find it full of mirrors. Everywhere he turns, he sees his own face staring back. Terrifying, isn't it? That's the horror they faced. They didn't just fear you, they feared themselves reflected through you. And here's the truth they'll never shake. You weren't just untouchable, you were a judgment they didn't expect. Every curse showed them the ugliness of their own hearts. Every spell boomeranged their intentions back home. And now, chosen one, they know the truth. They can't fight you without fighting themselves. Number 5. You walked through gates they'll never even find. They knock on doors that never open while you walk through gates that swing wide at your arrival. That's the wound they can't stop bleeding from. Chosen one. They tried to climb walls, break locks, and manipulate systems for access they were never meant to have. Rituals, circles, chants, sacrifices. It was all their way of forcing entry into realms beyond them. But you didn't have to force anything. The universe invited you. That's what tears them apart. Your access wasn't stolen, it was granted. Imagine this: 2 people standing outside a mansion. One is picking locks, sweating, breaking windows, desperate to get inside. The other simply has the key in their pocket and walks in calmly. That's the difference between them and you. Their access was counterfeit, forced, temporary. Yours was natural, lasting, undeniable. And no matter how hard they worked, no matter how many spirits they summoned, they could never replicate what you carry with ease. Here's a fact to slice through their illusions. Counterfeit power always has an expiration date. It burns fast, but it burns out. True access lasts because it's rooted in alignment, not performance. That's why their rituals collapse, while your stillness carries weight. They relied on secrets whispered in dark corners, while you were downloading blueprints from silence, from endurance, from the universe itself. Quote this into their nightmares: "They study shadows, but you were taught by the light itself." That's what infuriates them. They spent years trying to manipulate outcomes through tricks, while you became a vault of wisdom just by surviving your storms. You didn't hustle for access, it trusted you because you could hold it. And maybe you've asked yourself, why me? Why do I see things they can't? Why do I feel guided when they're scrambling? Because chosen ones aren't given access for entertainment. They're given access for endurance. You paid the price they refused to pay. Patience, pain, humility, sacrifice. They want shortcuts. You carried the long road. And that's why your words shake atmospheres, while theirs die in echoes. Picture it this way: they mimic peace like actors on stage, but you embody it so deeply that chaos flees when you enter a room. They fake light through crystals and rituals, but you are the light that exposes their disguise. That's humiliating for them, because every move you make reminds them of the gate they'll never pass. And here's the sharpest cut. They saw the price you paid, but their pride won't let them pay it. They wanted access without surrender. They wanted rank without humility. But those gates don't open for ego. They only open for those who endured the breaking. And that's why, chosen one, they tried to destroy you, because every step you take reminds them of the door forever shut in their face. Number 6. You were the target that turned into their caution sign. They thought they wrote your obituary, but all they really wrote was their own warning label. That's the dagger in their chest, chosen one. They circled you, marked you as prey, convinced themselves you were weak, isolated, easy to break. In their eyes, you looked like a wounded animal, quiet, detached, with no allies to defend you. But predators always make the same mistake. They confuse silence with fragility. They thought you were an easy meal. Instead, they became the feast for their own downfall. Imagine this: a hunter aims his weapon at what he thinks is a harmless deer, but when he fires, the deer doesn't fall. It transforms into a lion, and suddenly the hunter is running for his life. That's what happened here. They picked you out like prey, but the moment they attacked, they realized they were the ones trapped. Here's a truth they'll never unlearn. Every chosen one carries a record. Every attack becomes evidence. You weren't just their assignment, you were their setup. Every move they made against you was logged by a higher order they couldn't see. They believed they were orchestrating your collapse, but in reality, they were drafting their own exposure. That's why so many of them fell apart after coming for you. And maybe you wonder, why did everything backfire on them so badly? Because chosen ones aren't random targets. Touching you is like striking lightning with bare hands. The backlash is instant. They thought they were throwing darkness at you, but every curse, every scheme, every whisper turned back on them multiplied. They didn't just fail, they destroyed themselves trying to destroy you. Imagine again a circle of people digging a pit for one soul. They laugh, they plot, they celebrate in advance, but the ground gives way beneath their feet, and they all tumble into the very hole they dug. That's their story now. You didn't have to push them in. They fell in on their own. Quote this back into their silence. The one you marked became the mark against you. You were supposed to collapse, but instead you rose. You were supposed to fade, but instead you flourished. And now your very survival is a scar across their reputation. They speak your name in hushed tones, not because you're fragile, but because your endurance proved fatal to their pride. Some of them lost relationships, others lost money, health, or peace. A few lost the very covens they hid behind, and all of it happened because they underestimated what happens when you attack someone aligned with a force bigger than manipulation. You didn't swing back. You didn't need to. The universe swung for you. Now your life has become the caution sign others read before even thinking of moving against you. People who once mocked you now hesitate. They saw pits turn into platforms, closed doors turn into gateways, curses turn into blessings. You weren't supposed to make it, but you did. And now your survival has rewritten the rules. You're no longer just a survivor, chosen one. You're a statement, a walking example of what happens when enemies gamble their future trying to sabotage someone built to endure. They thought you were their assignment, but you became their aftermath. The living reminder that messing with you comes with consequences that echo long after the attack ends. Number 7, their crowds made them fragile. Your solitude made you lethal. They needed a choir to feel powerful. You only needed silence to become unstoppable. That's the crack in their armor, chosen one. They gathered in dozens, chanting, whispering, reinforcing each other's delusions, thinking that collective energy made them strong. But all they built was dependency. They could not stand alone. And your very isolation forged you into something they can't even define. Imagine this, a pack of wolves howling together to intimidate, but in the distance stands one lion, silent, steady, unbothered. The wolves only sound strong because they have each other. The lion doesn't need a pack. Its presence is enough. That's you. Their numbers were noise. Your isolation was precision. Here's a fact to rip their illusion wide open. In nature, groupthink weakens decision-making. Studies prove that crowds often produce worse outcomes than individuals because fear of standing out waters down courage. That's why they had to gather. They were terrified of facing you alone. You, on the other hand, were refined in solitude. Every betrayal, every abandonment, every night you faced yourself in silence, those were the battles that sharpened you. And maybe you've asked yourself, why did I have to go through so much alone? Because isolation was your training ground. What they mistook for weakness was actually your forge. In that quiet, you learned discipline they'll never know. While they fed off each other's hype, you learned to breathe fire without an audience. While they needed validation, you found clarity in the absence of voices. Quote this into their nightmares. Crowds create noise, but solitude creates weapons. They leaned on manipulation to stay united, but you leaned on fire to stay alive. Their unity was fragile because it was forced. Your solitude was deadly because it was chosen by circumstance, endured by strength, and transformed into mastery. Picture a blade in the blacksmith's fire, alone, unseen, pounded again and again until it becomes unbreakable. That was you. Every betrayal was a hammer, every sleepless night was the flame, and what came out of that furnace wasn't weakness. It was a weapon sharper than their entire pack combined. They had to gather because none of them could stand alone. You terrify them because you became lethal precisely because you stood alone. You didn't just survive solitude, you weaponized it. And now, no matter how many they gather, they know one thing with certainty: their numbers will never outweigh your silence. Number 8. You were the vault they couldn't unlock, the realm they couldn't enter. They thought you were an open book, but every page they touched burned their fingers. That's what drives them insane, chosen one. They pride themselves on being able to read people, scan their energy, decode their motives, predict their next move. But when it came to you, their instruments failed. Their rituals, their watchers, their so-called spirits, all of it hit a wall. You were unreadable, a vault sealed tight, a map with no legend. Imagine this: a thief with all the lockpicks in the world approaches a door. He twists, he pries, he sweats, but the door doesn't just stay shut. It melts his tools in his hands. That's what you were. They approached you with every trick in their arsenal, but every attempt backfired, leaving them more frustrated, more confused, more blind than before. Here's a fact that slices through their illusions. Systems of control only work when they can predict behavior. In warfare, generals rely on patterns. Break the pattern, and the entire strategy collapses. That's what you did. They look for wounds to exploit, chaos to manipulate, ego to inflate. But you closed those doors through healing, clarity, and discipline. With nothing left open, they were forced to face the truth. They had no access. Quote this, straight into their shadows: mystery isn't hidden, it's encrypted. And you, chosen one, were encrypted with codes they'll never crack. They operate in lower frequencies fueled by fear, envy, and manipulation. You came from a higher order, one they can't even step into. So when they tuned their antennas toward you, all they heard was static. Their visions warped, their dreams twisted, their predictions failed, and every failure reminded them you exist in a realm where their access is permanently denied. Picture it like this: they're fishermen casting nets into shallow water, pulling up prey with ease. But you're not in shallow water at all. You're in the depths, a place their nets can't reach. They tug and tug, but they come up empty. That emptiness is now haunting them. And maybe you've wondered, why couldn't they track me like they did others? Because you were never built from the same blueprint. They prey on souls constructed from ego, desperation, or fear. You were constructed from alignment, endurance, and purpose. That difference made you untraceable. Every failed attempt left them weaker: headaches, distorted visions, sleepless nights. Their own magic became their torment because it couldn't find you. And that's why they fear you now. Because when someone can't be read, they can't be controlled. You weren't just invisible to them, you were untouchable, and that untouchability shattered their system completely. Number 9. Their worst nightmare was you remembering your own power. They weren't scared of your silence. They were terrified of the day you'd finally hear yourself. That's the war beneath every attack, chosen one. Their spells, their curses, their rituals, those were distractions. The real battlefield was always your identity. They knew if they could distort your reflection, they could delay your rise. If they could convince you that you were ordinary, broken, or powerless, then you'd never unlock the one thing they feared most: the truth of who you are. Imagine this: a bird raised inside a cage, taught that it cannot fly. The cage door is wide open, but the bird never leaves because it was trained to believe the sky wasn't meant for it. That's how they treated you. They planted voices, relationships, and environments that echoed the same lie: you're nothing special. They thought if they repeated it long enough, you'd never test your wings. But deep inside, you always felt it, that unshakable knowing that you were different, that you were meant for more. Here's a fact they banked on: psychological warfare is more powerful than physical blows. Gaslighting has broken more warriors than swords. That's why they hit your mind first, trying to sever your connection with your source. But what they didn't account for is resilience. No matter how many lies they wrapped around you, truth was still pulsing inside, waiting for its moment. Quote this into their ruin: the most dangerous soul is the one who remembers. And that's exactly what happened. They could delay it, distract it, bury it under noise, but they could never erase it. The day you stood up and remembered who you are, their entire system shook. Because once you see yourself clearly, no one can sell you a distorted reflection again. And maybe you've asked yourself, why were they so relentless? Why target me so early, so ruthlessly? Because they saw your potential long before you did. They knew what would happen if you ever woke up to your rank. They couldn't stop your calling, so they tried to stop your awareness of it. But awareness can only be delayed, never destroyed. Imagine a switch being flipped in a dark room. The second the light comes on, every shadow loses its power. That's what happened when you remembered. Their curses collapsed, their manipulation failed, their control shattered. You became nuclear, not because you changed overnight, but because you finally realized you didn't need their permission to exist in power. And now it's too late. The veil has lifted. You know who you are, and that truth alone has done more damage to their kingdom than any ritual, any scheme, any attack could ever accomplish. Number 10. They saw you burn, but you walked out without a scar. They built furnaces to destroy you, but all they did was refine your steel. That's the horror story they're still replaying in their heads, chosen one. They didn't just want to sting you with petty curses or whispers. They engineered fires meant to incinerate your spirit completely. They studied your weak spots like architects of destruction, then designed betrayals, financial sabotage, and suffocating isolation, all to ensure you'd collapse. But the script flipped. You didn't collapse. You walked through the flames and came out untouched. Imagine this: a glass placed in the fire shatters instantly, but a diamond thrown into the same blaze comes out shining brighter. They expected you to shatter. Instead, you revealed yourself as the diamond. They waited for cracks, for smoke, for permanent scars. What they got was a version of you they can't even recognize, stronger, lighter, wiser, glowing with a resilience they can't replicate. Here's a fact they can't swallow. Trauma usually leaves marks, mental breakdowns, bitterness, scars that linger for life. That's what they were banking on, but you defied the statistics. You healed where others would have stayed broken. You smiled where others would have turned bitter. You carried clarity where others would have drowned in confusion. That's what shook them. They know exactly how much heat they turned up. And yet there you stand, with no smoke on your name. Quote this into their silence. The same fire that consumes the weak becomes the forge of the strong. And that's what burns them most. Their infernos weren't random. They were controlled, calculated, designed to kill your essence. But every trap turned into training, every betrayal into wisdom, every loss into leverage. You didn't just survive the fire. You became proof that fire has limits. Picture this, a phoenix rising from ashes, wings blazing, not only alive, but transformed. That's you. They thought the ashes would be your grave, but they became your platform. And now, every time they see your peace, your joy, your clarity, it taunts them with the reminder, the fire didn't break you, it birthed you. They threw everything, spells, lies, sabotage, thinking one of them had to stick. None did, and that's why they're trembling now, not because of what you said, but because of what you became. You are living evidence that endurance is deadlier than any curse. You are proof that nothing they build can destroy what the fire has already refined. And here's the truth they can't escape. If that level of heat didn't break you, nothing ever will. And now they know they never stood a chance. Number 11, their dark arts collapsed against the deadly weight of your alignment. They mastered spells for decades, but your single yes shattered everything. That's the gut punch they can't recover from, chosen one. They invested years into rituals, nights under the moon, decades memorizing chants, perfecting formulas, twisting energy into weapons. They became experts in deception, manipulation, and bending reality. But all of that mastery was annihilated by one thing they never prepared for: your obedience. Imagine this. Two armies facing off. One carries elaborate weapons, sharpened blades, shields polished to perfection. The other carries nothing but discipline, moving in precise silence, obeying every signal from the commander. The flashy weapons mean nothing when faced with soldiers who follow orders without hesitation. That was you. They had rituals, you had alignment, and alignment trumps force every single time. Here's a fact they can't compute. Obedience rewires outcomes. Studies in strategy and warfare show that disciplined obedience to a greater plan consistently defeats chaotic force. They operated in force. You moved in precision. That's why their structures toppled while you stood tall. Quote this into their hollow rituals. Power without alignment is noise. Alignment without force is lethal. They couldn't grasp how your quiet moves, fasting in silence, forgiving when it burned, walking away when you wanted to fight, were dismantling their empire. But obedience doesn't need to shout. It strikes in silence and leaves ruins in its wake. Maybe you've wondered, why did my smallest choices cause such big collapses in their world? Because your obedience wasn't ordinary. Each act carried weight. Every time you forgave, it released judgment. Every time you chose silence, it dismantled their schemes. Every time you said yes to the pull of truth, walls they had built for years cracked and fell. They couldn't see the code behind your actions, but they felt the earthquakes it produced. Picture it. They were writing spells with chalk on the ground, confident in their geometry. But you carried lightning in your hand. When it struck, their chalk melted into nothing. That's the level of mismatch between their craft and your alignment. And here's what terrifies them most. You don't announce your moves. You don't draw circles, light candles, or broadcast your plans. You simply listen. You walk when told, pause when prompted, speak when necessary. And that unpredictability makes you lethal, because when you move, you don't move alone. Realms shift with you. They know now they were never truly fighting you. They were fighting your alignment, and that's a battle darkness can never win. Number 12. You didn't just break free, you broke the bloodline curse. They thought you'd be another link in the chain, but you showed up as the one who snapped it in half. That's why their fear runs deeper than your personal victories, chosen one. This battle was never only about your life. It was about everything that came before you and everything that will come after. The attacks weren't just to wound your present. They were aimed at keeping ancestral cycles alive. Poverty, betrayal, addiction, silence, rejection, sabotage. Patterns etched into your bloodline long before you breathed your first breath. Imagine this, a family tree with roots poisoned for generations. Everyone who eats from it grows weak, repeating the same mistakes, caught in the same traps. And then, one seed grows differently. One branch refuses to rot. That's you. They assumed you'd fold like those before you. They counted on you surrendering to bitterness, numbing yourself in addiction, or collapsing into silence. But instead, you questioned the lies. You faced the pain head-on. You picked up the battles your ancestors couldn't fight and refused to pass them forward. That's what terrifies them. You interrupted the script. Here's a fact that crushes their schemes. Trauma and dysfunction pass down like inheritance until someone consciously disrupts the cycle. You became that disruption. Every tear you cried, every refusal to return to the old ways, every time you chose healing over habit, it wasn't just survival, it was surgery. You cut the arteries that fed generational bondage. Quote this into their collapse. The curse dies where courage lives. You stood in the very places that once swallowed your lineage whole and declared, it ends here. And the moment you did, the unseen structures cracked. What had been tolerated for decades began to crumble under your resilience. Picture it like this. They built prisons across generations, confident no one would ever find the keys. But you weren't looking for keys. You tore the hinges off the doors. Now those prisons stand useless, open, powerless to contain anyone after you. That's why they're panicking, because your survival didn't just save you. It rewrote the blueprint for everyone connected to you. And maybe you've wondered, why me? Why was I chosen to carry battles so heavy? Because only the strongest link can end the chain. You weren't just healing your own wounds, you were repairing an entire bloodline. And now you're walking into new ground your ancestors only dreamed of. Clarity, prosperity, peace, strength. That's a legacy no witchcraft can erase without destroying itself. They wanted you broken. Instead, you became the curse breaker, and that's the fear they'll never outrun. Number 13. You became the firewall that torched every scheme before it reached you. They thought they wrote your downfall, but your spirit lit their blueprints on fire before the ink dried. That's the reality that haunts them, chosen one. They moved strategically, not impulsively. They studied your habits like scientists. They tracked your weaknesses like predators. They timed their rituals to moons, dates, and windows of vulnerability. They crafted attacks with precision, convinced they had mapped you out like a road on GPS. But no matter how careful their planning was, their energy never landed. Their damage never stuck. Their outcomes always collapsed. Imagine this. An architect spends years designing a skyscraper on paper, every line precise, every detail flawless. But when they try to build it, the plans combust in their hands before a single brick is laid. That's what your presence did. You didn't just block their rituals, you corrupted their entire operating system. Their code glitched every time it touched your atmosphere. Here's the brutal truth they didn't calculate. You were never just a survivor. You were a firewall, not man-made, not ritual-based, but hardwired into your soul through every scar, every heartbreak, every night you chose growth over retaliation. Firewalls don't just protect, they incinerate threats at the source. That's why their magic didn't just fail, it backfired. Their curses jammed mid-air, their visions distorted, their rituals collapsed under their own weight. Quote this back into their shadows. What was designed to harm you became the spark that exposed them. That's what terrifies them, because every time they came for you, they triggered their own unraveling. Not because you cursed them, but because they broke a law bigger than themselves when they touched what was covered. You weren't even trying to fight them. You were just breathing, healing, praying, surviving, and still, your firewall was intercepting every move, burning through blueprints before they reached your doorstep. And maybe you've asked yourself, how did I keep sensing things before they even happened? That wasn't paranoia, that was encryption. You became spiritually encoded by pain. Every loss rewired you with precision. Every betrayal built discernment into your veins. That's why you can feel the strike before it forms, why their attacks dissolve in silence before you even notice. Picture it like this. They were archers releasing arrows at midnight, but each arrow turned to ash the moment it hit the air around you. That's the design they never saw coming. You weren't just a target, you were a trap. Every strike against you activated consequences they weren't prepared to face. And now they're terrified because nothing works. Every strategy falls apart mid-launch. Every ritual ends in chaos. Every plan dies before birth. You're unreadable, unshakable, and untouchable. Because firewalls don't negotiate. They don't just defend, they prosecute. And your very existence has become the evidence of what happens when darkness collides with someone built in fire and shielded by it. Number 14, they've seen your power. Now they're running for cover. They thought they were hunting prey. Instead, they walked into a storm. That's the revelation rattling them to their core, chosen one. At first, they saw you as flesh and blood, a target they could isolate, weaken and dismantle with spells, manipulation and surveillance. But what they encountered wasn't just a person, it was an event. You weren't playing defense, you were sent to end something. And now, the entire network they built in secret over years, rituals, whispers, pacts of fear, is unraveling right in front of them because of you. Imagine this. A group of engineers spends years constructing a dam, confident it can hold back the flood. Then one day, a single crack appears, and in hours, the entire structure collapses, drowning its creators. That's what your breakthrough did. They thought if you survived, you'd stumble out broken, battered, barely alive. But you didn't stumble. You walked out blazing, with clarity, authority, and proof that nothing they built could hold you. That shook them, because it meant every curse, every alliance, every ritual failed. Here's a fact they never wanted to face. Fear-based systems always implode from the inside once their illusion of power is broken. That's why their coven is splintering now. Suspicion is eating them alive. They're pointing fingers, wondering who betrayed the circle. The energy they once hurled at you is ricocheting back, poisoning their own camp. Division, nightmares, accidents, paranoia. Their downfall isn't something you created. It's the debt of their own choices finally being collected. Quote this into their collapse. You weren't just their target, you became their receipt. They can't outrun the cost, because it was never yours to carry. It was always theirs. And now the backlash is writing itself across their lives. They see it in their broken unity, their unraveling confidence, their failed rituals. They know why it's happening. It's because they touched you. Maybe you've asked, why are they retreating now after being so bold before? Because the mask is gone. Their control is shattered. Their power has limits, and your rise exposed it. You weren't just proof that survival is possible. You became evidence that divine order always overrides dark agendas. You weren't a victim. You were a verdict. Picture it. They lit fires to consume you, but the blaze turned inward, burning their own foundation. That's why they're scrambling, trying to undo what they set in motion, pulling back rituals like arrows they wish they never shot. But it's too late. You already scattered their camp. You already showed them that picking you was the beginning of their end. And here's the strike that haunts them most. You didn't need revenge. Your existence was revenge enough. You were the interruption that rewrote the script. Their witchcraft triggered your ascension, and now your rise is judgment they cannot escape. They thought they'd silence you. Instead, they amplified you. They thought they'd bury you. Instead, you became the earthquake. You weren't sent just to survive. You were sent to dismantle, and you did. Quietly, relentlessly, irrevocably. That's why they tremble now, because they finally know you weren't just their assignment. You were their consequence. And chosen one, if this message lit a fire in your spirit, don't let it fade. Press that like button right now if you haven't already. And if you're still not part of this family, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the truth that was meant for you. Every click helps spread this light further, reaching souls who need it just as much as you did. You are part of something bigger now, a movement, a force, a family. Stay locked in, stay rising, and remember, your very existence is the proof they can't silence.